kuhoji wale ambao ni viongozi ambao wamehudhuria hotuba ambayo imetolewa hapo, budget policy statement. Naam, turejea kwa lugha ya Kimombo sasa. And indeed, thank you very much for that insight from Parliament. We now want to essentially start by fact-checking some of the sentiments that have been articulated by members of Parliament and senators there, because some of the things said seem to be completely inaccurate. I'll introduce my panel and then get into that. My extreme left, we have Mr. James Mulili, rather, from PKF. Karibu sana. Of course, John Nyangi has been here since morning from the Institute of Public Finance, IPF. Again, thank you very much for taking the time. And Ken Wanjohi from KPMG. Thank you. Now, gentlemen, a lot of the things that have just been said, some completely untrue, some completely not right. We've had different numbers being thrown about as pertaining to the size of the budget. I want to start with you, John. The MP for Nyeri Town, he claims that the cash put aside in this case for health and some of the things he's talked about in terms of SHIF, some of those things are not true.
Yeah, thank you, Akaba. First of all, he's alluding to the promise that has been there with the new reforms in the health sector, meant to improve access to health. Now, when we see the numbers in this budget are not aligned to the promises. For example, we have seen that the health budget has come down from 141 billion that was approved in 23-24 budget to 127 billion. So that is a 14%, 14 billion a reduction. Then you wonder, when we're having such a big reduction, over 10%, at a time when we are giving high promises and a time when we have introduced a number of things into the health sector, like free services from dispensary health center up to the level 5. So how are we going to meet that with a reduction in the budget? Otherwise, we would have seen that the promise is linked with the numbers. We would have seen the budget increase in the health sector to back up with the promise. But I think maybe they're hoping that they're going to press hard on the contributions from the 2.75%, which is coming to fill that gap. But then, the promise was that we are not going to reduce the budget for health. The more contribution through medical insurance is going to boost the health sector. But that is not the case, because you're bringing more money through insurance and you are cutting the budget. So what is the net effect? Either it's going down or we are just at the same place.
Maybe then the thought is that they might be taking us some of that slack through the financing that will come in from the private sector, but who knows? We'll see. I want to bring in James Mulili at this juncture. What has stood out for you, especially in the sentiments the members of Parliament and other leaders have brought out? Do you think they have understood what has been going on? Some of them simply seeming completely at sea.
Thank you, Akaba. And what I can say is that I think the members of Parliament seem to be taking sides, depending on where their allegiances are, and not practically looking at the proposals in the finance bill. Actually, you noticed one of the MPs completely was confused. Are we talking about the budget or the finance bill? And that only paints a very sad picture, because at the end of the day, ultimately, they are the ones who are supposed to make a decision on how this finance bill will be enacted into an act and the impact it will have on Kenyans. But in a nutshell, just to paint the picture from the budget speech, rather budget statement, you'll realize a majority of the proposals as are contained in the finance bill, the CS unfortunately has just regurgitated what is in the finance bill. And you see some of the things that we are seeing, and which my colleagues will also comment on. It is clear. It looks like the motor vehicle circulation tax is going nowhere. He repeated the 2.5% rate with the lower cap of 5,000. He didn't mention about the upper cap.
The 100,000.
But I guess we'll just have to wait until when we get the Finance Act, which is something very retrogressive, given the current circumstances. But I will choose to sort of start on a positive note in terms of some of the beneficiaries from this finance bill. I think employees will get a little bit of reprieve.
Yes.
Because of certain good considerations in terms of increases in some allowable deductions when it comes to the payslip. And a good example is a proposed increase in the 240,000 pension contributions per annum, which is basically deducted before employees are taxed.
Yes.
And there's a proposal to increase that from 240 to 360,000. For those who are servicing any mortgages, the mortgage interest basically relief. There's a proposal to move it up from 300K per year to 360. Then generally from an employment perspective, there are certain proposed increases in terms of the benefits that are not subject to tax, like the meal benefit, among other benefits. So
sorry to interrupt you, but then we also remember that there are things which are impacting you at the top line because the deductions are done on gross.
Yes.
Like the housing levy that we've all been speaking about for the past 1 year. So that even with the relief that you're talking about, it would seem government is giving with one hand and taking with the other.
Yeah, correct. But then maybe also to add to that, the finance bill also contains a proposal where employees will be allowed a deduction before they are taxed on contributions to SHIF.
Yes, the social
health insurance fund.
Yes.
As well as their contributions to affordable housing. So to a large extent, from what we've analyzed, there will still be a benefit, but then you have to bear in mind that come 1st of July, SHIF kicks in at the rate of 2.75% of gross.
Yes.
So are we looking at a situation of, like you've mentioned, government
this
giving
is not
with one
even
hand?
A contribution.
Yes.
They are taking your money.
Yeah, they're taking your money. So yes, on one hand, they might be telling you they'll give you a deduction.
Yes.
But what will be the impact of the 2.75% when it comes in? Are we looking at some mind games here where it will just reinstate you to where you are? So those really are some of the questions. But I think in terms of beneficiaries, employees to some extent get a fair share. The CS mentioned something on basically widening the tax base. There is one proposal that he never mentioned in his statement. It is in the bill.
Yes.
But for anyone who supplies to the government or to a public entity, there will be a 3% withholding tax if you supply goods.
Okay.
Now, I think where the government has been losing out tax revenue is on suppliers to itself.
Yes.
And given that the government is the biggest consumer,
yes,
that 3% withholding tax is actually a big gain to the government if that money is put to good use.
Will this be recognized at the transaction stage so that when you book this income or when you actually paid, because then that makes a difference on the working capital?
So it is at the point of payment.
Okay.
Yes.
So that for those people who, for example, will supply and you've sat 5 years, no payment, then you pay it once your cash comes in.
Yeah, you pay it once your cash comes. Okay. It would be very unfortunate if they deduct the withholding tax and 3 years down the line you're still on the pending.
There are people who had to take loans before to service these sorts of things and haven't been paid yet for 3 years.
Yeah, true.
Okay, indeed, very good insights. We'll come back to that. Let's bring in Ken.
Yeah.
Let's start off with, of course, the MPs. You've heard what they've said. We've seen some very forceful ones, including one who's actually pre-voted and said she's voting no. There seems to be a sense of hopelessness in terms of the fact that they have the ability to participate, put in proposals, debate, and then move amendments in Parliament on this thing. But she doesn't seem to think that will work, so she's already voting no and shooting it down. Why do you think this is the case? And then, of course, what stood out for you?
Yeah, and maybe I'll just echo my colleague Yamulili. It seems people have taken sides.
Yes.
Some are very excited about the 400 billion that is going to be allocated to counties. But then you find other sides are saying, this finance bill is going to be, affect so many of the Kenyans, and that's why they are pre-voting. And I would think when it comes to voter confidence, because where I come from, I should be able to hold my MP accountable for some of the proposals. But I guess what we've been seeing in prior periods is that voting is being done as a block. Right now, when you look at the budget, around 4 trillion budget, I know numbers have been moving around. And when you look at the Revenue Authority, what they have collected to date, maybe they are going to close at around 2.2 trillion. They're expected now to collect around 2.9 trillion. That's around 20% increase. How are we going to support that? And when you're looking at our economy, the CS himself said that we're growing at around 5%. So there are certain things that we need to check. Even though they're excited about the spending, where is money going to come from? So
then the question then I'd ask you is, what magic does government hope to work with a 5% increase in GDP, essentially the economy growing at 5%, and realizing a 20% increase in revenue from that in terms of taxation? I mean, the entire disconnect.
Exactly. And
is there something we don't know?
Possibly there is. You talked about the hard-to-tax economies.
Yes.
You know, we have so many people with PINs, but the respective income is not being declared. And I know that's where they were trying to go with introducing the motor vehicle tax, but I don't think it's going to address that.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of, when you look at investments in KRA, when it comes to technology, let's try to bring e-teams, to net everyone. But I guess where the issue is coming in is about confidence that people have, even with the government, and they're not willing to come. The government introduced tax amnesty, which was expected really to net a lot of revenue, but when it comes to the performance, has not been there. So for me, when I look at some of the things that did stand out, and you look at agriculture, where the bottom-up transformation agenda is looking at agriculture transformation. But then when you look at the proposals that have been proposed in the finance bill, example, look at the sugar industry, and one of the things that when they looked at the supply chain of sugar, they realized the cost of transportation was really contributing was a big factor to the price. And they decided, let's make this zero-rated. But now when you look at what you're seeing in the finance bill proposal, it's the opposite.
In fact, the vehicle tax will directly impact that, and the proposed increase in road levy will impact that as well.
Exactly, and also when you look at now, they've moved this transportation to VATable.
Yes.
Look at the inputs, pesticides for agriculture products. In the current act, they are zero-rated, but there are proposals to move it now to to exempt position. So you see, there's a lot of misalignment. When it comes, to the transformation agenda, it's a welcome move, but how do you implement it when it comes to the other side?
John, were these documents penned in the same building with people speaking to each other? Because we see such beautiful proposals, we see such beautiful intention, but where the rubber meets the road, really big difference. For instance, he may not have highlighted it, but one of the proposals that has been in the finance bill is the fact that mobile money and other financial transactions can now be requisitioned without having to go to court if KRA wants to get insight into where your money is and what it looks like. Some of these things really walking backwards in terms of giving people confidence in the financial sector and financial inclusion. What are we missing?
We wait to see whether that...
will pan out.
Whether the KRA will get the rights to be able to monitor transactions in your private
domains,
and private mobile money. But also at the same time, the government will be able to get more money because there's more money in that space. But again, in terms of spurring the economic growth, it might be able to discourage people from doing what? From transacting online, transacting electronically, and they tend to go back to cash economy. And that in itself, we might see it having a negative impact even on the overall target. And when you look at what my colleague has alluded here, that 2.9 trillion revenue target is definitely they are going to miss that. And now they're celebrating about the fiscal deficit that has come down. The fiscal deficit will go when the revenue target is missed. The expenditure will not be revised. see what will happen. The government will increase the fiscal deficit and will go for more debt. And even as we're talking about reducing the fiscal deficit and achieving a balanced budget by 2027,
is it realistic?
Realistic.
Yes. Well, really depressing sentiments here, gentlemen. Let's change tone a bit. Let's discuss the winners. Would you say there are any highlights, Bwana Mulili, that stand out for you as the things that we can say these are wins in this budget? Which are the sectors that might be looking at possibly more revenue, and we will say that they can then become significant contributors to development, whether it's security, education, any of those things? Yes.
To be honest, and I think my opening statements
alluded to some of those, yes.
Individuals who are employed who seem to be getting some benefits,
yes,
in terms of some reprieve in how much their taxable pay will be at the end of the day.
Yes.
And obviously the government, when it comes to anyone who's supplying goods, I think those seems to be
definitely
the only set.
Oh, really?
Yes, and the reason I'm saying that is because actually if you look at the finance bill, if there is a sector that has been hard done by this finance bill is manufacturing sector. And think about it this way. It's only in the Finance Act 2023 that there was an introduction of the Export Promotion Investment Levy.
Wow.
This had an impact on that sector. Then there is the proposed eco levy, which is literally affecting manufacturers, whether they are importing or they're doing local production. Besides that, if you look at any other benefits that the manufacturers will get from this finance bill, there's actually nothing. And I'll give you a very good example of the proposed introduction of excise duty on vegetable oils at the rate of 25%.
Yes.
Now, obviously what that means...
And that is after a 25% increase in the import excise duty on crude palm oil when it arrives in
the port. Now, and you see this negative effect will be felt at both the consumer level,
yes,
and at the manufacturer level, in the sense that the manufacturer will have an increased cost.
Yes.
The price of that commodity will go up.
Yes.
But it does not stop there. Remember, the vegetable oils are being packaged in plastic containers.
Yes.
In the same finance bill, there's a proposal to introduce excise duty on locally manufactured plastics,
yes,
at the rate of 10%. So you can actually see the multiplier effect
yes,
when it comes to that sector in terms of the cost of doing business and also the affordability of the product at the end of the day. To make it worse,
yes,
very essential services that facilitate trade in terms of financial services, and I think you touched about financial inclusivity,
yes,
as well as inclusivity when it comes to the insurance sector.
Yes.
There are certain financial services and insurance services that will be that are proposed to be subject to VAT.
Yes.
Now, already, I think the uptake of a product like insurance products is very low. And now, we are talking about making some of these insurance and financial services subject to VAT. We're also introducing a motor vehicle tax
yes,
that will be applicable every year when Kenyans are renewing their insurance. What does that mean generally to the financial...
In fact,
yes,
one aspect which people have not considered, because I think it's lazy government, because insurance values your car when you're doing the comprehensive insurance. So it was an easy way of getting 2.5% of X.
Yeah.
of X.
Most people will now move to, yes, not comprehensive, third party. Now remember, there's no cost to getting third-party insurance in terms of valuation, right? So this cost is then borne by the insurance company, which then has to figure out a way to lump this onto the consumer on top of the amount they're paying for third-party insurance, not to mention the inconvenience.
That is true, and I recall after the finance bill was published,
yes,
there was a public notice in the dailies.
Yes.
And there was supposed to be a stakeholder involvement to discuss the issue of the valuation.
Yes.
Because you see the risk that this motor vehicle tax runs,
yes,
is the risk of everyone deciding,
yes,
I will take a third party.
And there's no valuation.
Then you see it throws the whole the whole discussion of the motor vehicle tax into disarray.
Yes.
So I don't know what the outcome of that engagement was with regards to determining how that should be done. Obviously, I know biggest input will come from the insurance companies.
Yes.
But then we'll have to see basically the practicality of how that works out. But then you see that's not even the only thing when it comes to financial services. The proposal to increase the excise duty on money transfer services is another
5%.
Is another issue. It is actually quite confusing that the budget statement was very keen on climate-related issues. But then if you look at the proposal to introduce a VAT at the rate of 16% on solar products, any e-mobility related issue is also proposed to be subject to VAT at 16%. So you really wonder, is the government trying to align to an agenda but with ulterior motives for whatever reason?
So we have about 6 minutes left. So I want each of you to take about 2 minutes. And the question then I'd ask is, with the seesawing we've seen, because it was the excise tax on mobile money went to 20, then was reduced to 15, now proposed back at 20, and many other things seeming to come and go. The unpredictability and the lack of, so to say, ability for businesses to extrapolate and project over long periods of time. How does this affect investors in terms of treating Kenya as a good place to do business? And then looking at this whole equation of what you've outlined for sectors like manufacturing. You talked about shooting ourselves in the foot earlier on. Do you think government is walking the talk on encouraging investment, or are we essentially doing away with that? 2 minutes, please.
To be honest, the government is not encouraging investment into the country. To share a very personal experience very briefly, one of my clients who's in manufacturing, as recently as yesterday, was very frank and said it is cheaper for me to move my factory to Uganda, and if I need to service the Kenyan market, then I will import from Uganda. Then being in Uganda gives me access to Central African markets.
Yes.
Very easy access. Now, this is a Kenyan company that has been here for over 40 years.
Wow.
Now, if that is a sentiment, forget about even foreign investors. If that is a sentiment coming from a Kenyan, then it is actually a very worrying move. The issue of unpredictability goes back to government's lack of seriousness on the national tax policy. This is a document that has already been published, but then we have to grapple with a myriad of tax changes each year. So is the government really walking its talk when it comes to the national tax policy? And I'll just pause at that.
Interesting question. I want to come to Ken.
Yeah. And, let me just take that question and you had asked who is winning. There's a proposal you were just discussing there with James C. and John.
Yes.
There's a proposal for public officers if you buy an asset or that is during your work activity, then you can be reimbursed for it, irrespective of whether you take ownership.
Really?
Yes. So
no, take that again. Let's say, let us say that again.
Yes.
Please repeat what you just said. Yes.
Yes. So one of the proposals, and it was there in the finance bill of 2023.
Yes.
It never saw the light of day because there was a lot of lobbying. It's been introduced now. Provides that a public officer, in the course of his duty, purchases any asset, irrespective of whether the asset will be in his name, can be able to get a reimbursement without being taxed.
Really?
Yeah. So you can buy a car, say you're using it
for work.
Yes. You get a full reimbursement without it being taxed.
Full reimbursement of value?
Yes, of the value.
Wow.
So that's what I'm telling you.
Maybe
public officers
country, yes.
Yeah, but it's something that we also did really lobby against. Now, when it comes to, in terms of spurring growth and what we have seen in the finance bill, look at eco-levy. I mean, when we did the public participation, and I did listen to, say, like the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, they are saying there's no even empirical evidence that the products that have been put there really are leading to pollution. And then when you look at the values that have been put there, these are values which are even expensive more than the cost of some of those products. example, like batteries, where you are valuing it per kg.
Yes, or wheelchair wheels, which will now face a 200% price increase.
Yeah, and the main issue is that you are levying on both imported and locally manufactured products. So what you're saying is, if you want to protect the local manufacturing entities, then possibly you would have considered just the imported, the imports. So for me, I think these proposals that we do have, one, are going to reduce part of the disposable income.
Yes.
And when disposable income is reduced, I'm unable to send maybe something home.
Yes.
That spurs some economic activity. I'm unable to invest. And when it comes to manufacturing, they really do not spur growth of
the sector.
Of factories. Yes. So for me, I do think that the government really needs to rethink the strategy. Because that is not going to be found in the finance bill.
John, in closing, briefly.
Yeah, I see the gainers here.
Yes.
Now we've just come from the long range and the Lino, and I see mosquito repellents being exempted from VAT.
Yes.
So people should...
And a lot of them don't even work. The mosquitoes are still attacking you everywhere. We use a bit quite here. Yes, please continue.
Yeah, I also see now the excise duty has been removed from importation of onions, potatoes and crepes from East African member countries, eggs. You know, we had these Escobo and arguments about getting eggs from Uganda.
From Uganda, yes.
But now that can come in without excise duty.
Okay.
But to the people who have, I think the suppliers to government really hoped that there would be adequate provision.
647 billion.
Yeah, in this budget to clear those pending bills.
Yes.
So government continues to owe them. And so they are quite a disappointed lot that they will continue to suffer when they really supplied.
Okay, indeed a very pertinent issue, because even this standard group is owed almost 3 billion shillings. But we will continue to wait. Gentlemen, unfortunately we've run out of time, but thank you for taking the time for this session. Of course, the news continues here, so we of course have the space to be back later. But for now, we want to cross over back to Parliament buildings and rejoin my colleague Ali Manzu, who's of course standing by to give us the latest and indeed additional insights in Swahili. Well, the fact of the matter having been that after that budget statement has been put out, there's been lots of different sentiment by the various interest groups, the various stakeholders, and of course the various people who have been present for that event. I'm not sure if he's ready, but if he's not, then we can of course continue to take Bonanyangi's closing comments. You were talking about the fact that before we cross over, I don't think they're ready. You had talked about earlier the fact that there seemed to be a war on the middle class. Essentially, the fact that a lot of the things that have been put out will essentially hit them in their pocketbooks. But then also the sentiment that we have a lot of people with very little disposable income who had been before targeted indirectly, being targeted directly. What impact do you think this will have on the cost of living?
Definitely the cost of living is going to rise. Already between this year 2024 and 2023, what we call real income has gone down by more than 2%.
Yes.
So that will make that situation worse. Because now, with these taxes, they take more income. And then, you know, the middle class, they drive the economy through consumption. They consume.
Yes.
They're the ones who drive, they're the ones who go for the ones who go for Nyamachoma, long kamakis. They're the ones who do second-hand Japanese car.
Yes.
And a huge share of their income is consumed. And it's through the consumption that spurs the demand in the economy and the industries need to produce. The top level, you know, they save a lot. They buy these policy, and you know when you're saving, the experts
long-term funds.
So when you're targeting the middle class, but also the middle class, they don't shout. They don't demonstrate. They're gentlemen. They spoke softly, and therefore they know. So you keep us you maintaining the normal curve.
Yes.
You have very few people at the top. So the hustlers, at least they have the 5 billion hustler fund.
Yes.
We'll be able to get the report on how it has been utilized and how many people have benefited from it having run for 1 year.
Yes.
And how many lives it has changed. But now the middle class,
yes,
they are the ones who are going to finance this, and they have no option. But let me tell you, Wakaba. So what next after we have finished this budget statement today?
Yes, I was actually going to go to that, but please.
So Kenyans should make 2 decisions.
Yes.
One, how will they treat the government if they give their views and then their views are not incorporated? We are going to see the final finance bill next week.
What options do they have?
Yeah, that's a question I'm asking. What will they do now? They should think whether they will be business as usual, continue to engage, and the feedback is not incorporated. Then secondly, during the implementation period, they don't involve. So Parliament should open up now and engage the public when they're considering the budget implementation review reports. Even these pending bills would not be there this much if the public would be scrutinizing the implementation report and giving feedback to the committee. And also during audit, the Public Accounts Committee, when is also scrutinizing the audit reports, we need to see this involvement and participation during the approval stage happening also during the stage of implementing the budget and the stage at which we are auditing the budget. More transparency and more involvement of the people. We hope the policy will be more responsive with more participation and feedback from the public.
So essentially more pushing, more engagement, more involvement. Here we have a few bonus minutes. So I'll bring in the 2 gentlemen back into this conversation. We have been talking a lot about the challenges that we're facing. And we sort of need maybe to start to point out the benefits or the ways in which government can then start to, so to say, find ways to then proactively implement what you're saying. But we'll hold that thought. I'm told my colleague is now available. Ali Manzu, ukiwa katika jumba la